Okay, we'll start the City of Olivet Planning and Community Design Commission for April 7th, 2022 to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Rob Jurgel,
Present.
Carol Wagner,
Present.
Jody Rich here, Richard Brophy, Brian Lewis,
Present.
Daniel Rosenberg,
Present.
and Tim Spiegelglass.
Mr. Spiegelglass noted that he will be out at this meeting and at our next coming meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let it also be known that City Council Liaison, Councilmember Missy Waldman is in attendance, as well as the Staff Liaison, Carlos Trejo, Director of Olivet's Planning Community Development Department, John Doty, Senior Planner, and Bridget Waters, Administrative Assistant. I believe she's online. Is that correct? As well as City Manager Barb Sonda. So thank you for coming. All right. So typically at this time, we will ask for public comments, but I just want to remind everybody that these public comments are related to items that are not on the agenda. We do ask you that when you, if you do have a public comment, that you limit your time to no more than 3 minutes, regardless if it's related to a general public comment or a comment that's related to an item specific on the agenda. We do ask you to kind of, if you're in the audience, raise your hand. If you're conducting it via Zoom, there should be a little icon at the bottom of the screen where you can raise your hand as well. And we'll try to bring everybody on and try to be respectful and as concise as possible. That'd be helpful. All right. Just to remind everybody too, as far as, well, it looks like I kind of jumped around a little bit, but that's all right. As we go through the petitions, we'll first start off with a presentation or report conducted by staff. Then there'll be some comments amongst members of the council members or commission members to, ask questions. At that point in time, we typically bring on the petitioner and ask questions and have some discussion. And then after that, then we'll ask for public comments related to those agenda items. We do ask anybody who does, want to make a comment, or anybody who comes up in front of the board, to please state your name and address for the record. And that would be great. Okay, Carlos?
Chairman, going back to our agenda, on the old business items, 545 Long Acres Drive was approved by the commission, and you received a copy of the revised elevations that you left to the administrative authority to review and approve, and we have done so. We spoke with the petitioner already on that, so they can go ahead and submit their development plans. For 96 Ashmont Drive, that item is being deferred tonight. The developer or petitioner is working on a revised set of plans that probably will remove one of the bays and therefore move the structure closer to the north and expand the backyard area of that property. So the next item on that on the agenda, tonight's agenda, would be 1220 North Price Road regarding the special permit request. Unless there's any questions.
No, does anybody have any questions regarding this two previous? No, let's move on. This sounds like you streamlined the agenda for us.
Chairman, this item was on our agenda in early March at our first March meeting. It is regarding a request for a special permit to allow a indoor medical marijuana cultivation facility and manufacturing process for infused marijuana products in there. Both the cultivation and the manufacturing are permitted under the city's LID Light Industrial District, which this property ground is addressed as. It's an existing 150,000 square foot building consisting of masonry built back in 1965 as the distillery for Southern Comfort at that time. The site's nearly 6 acres. It's been primarily used for storage warehousing since the site became vacant after the distillery. At one time, it was used by Buffalo Tools, which they had a small commercial retail section for tool products. But since then, it's been more of a storage type of facility under some type of LLC, and usually managed by a separate entity. Over time, we've seen that the assessment declined on that parcel in there. We were approached by a group called New Horizon, and New Growth Horizon, and they were interested in this building, and they currently have it under contract to be a purchaser, and then also have a separate entity operate the medical marijuana cultivation and manufacturing on a majority of the building grounds. They would keep one of the tenants that's been there for quite some time in there, and they'd have still some expansion possibilities within the site itself. Again, the use would be permitted by right. However, in the discussions with the petitioner, they brought to our attention that during the cultivation process, there's a distinct odor that happens in there. And they wanted to make sure that we were aware, and they also wanted to discuss with the city what the procedures or processes would be or put in place to try to mitigate, manage, and oversee the concerns regarding that odor mitigation. In our discussions, we said that the best possible process would be to apply for a special permit. The reason we recommend a special permit is it gives the city two avenues for review. One, it requires a site plan, which they've provided. It's an existing building. Most of the modifications would take place indoors. And also the ability to place additional conditions for the operations of the site. Typically on a permitted use by right, if it's permitted, you're authorized to apply for your occupancy and go through, and any issues are either through code enforcement or through nuisance laws. Special permit is an additional layer that you could put in to help mitigate some of those in advance, especially if you're aware or know that some of those issues would come up. So long story short, they agreed to put together a odor mitigation plan to follow the process of the special permit in there. And again, that special permit gives the city the basis to place prescribed conditions on the operations in there, and also the ability to review a site plan in that process. The proposed conditions are termed an odor mitigation plan, which you have a copy of and was distributed at our last meeting, in which they would have a plan for facility design and odor mitigation, a plan for odor detection and management, and then a process for annual review. Within that odor mitigation plan, the facility design and odor mitigation would consist of an improvement plan to consider the odor mitigation during design and construction. That those plans be designed by licensed professionals that have experience with medical marijuana cultivation and medical marijuana infused products. And then to submit those schematic plans to the city for review, and even allow the city to utilize a third-party type of service to assist us in that review of those plans. The second component is regarding odor detection and management. They're willing to maintain a phone line for citizens to report odors, maintain written records of all calls received, review and analyze those records on a quarterly basis, and provide written reports to the city. And based on those records, implement an odor monitoring plan, which may include direction or advice from a third-party certified industrial hygienist. In addition, the third component of their odor mitigation plan would be to annually review with the city how the plan is working, how it's being monitored, and how can it be improved, even authorizing the city to use a third-party consultant to assist in that process. That kind of summarizes the odor mitigation plan that they propose to be included as part of the special permit that they would abide to in there. I do have a representative of the New Growth Horizon in attendance, and first I'd be glad to answer any specific questions the commission may have at this point.
Director.
This Carlos, it said in the special permit that the operator in the city will include a third-party certified industrial hygienist in such review. There's no indication there of who will hire that person and who's going to pay the costs. And I was just wondering, shouldn't we say something about that so there's no question about that later?
Yeah, it's a good question. We can pose it. I'll let the petitioner answer that and address that if the intent was
Okay,
I just through their process. Yes.
I don't imagine that it would cost that much, but either way, I think it's something that we should have.
They can get pricing.
Okay, that's something we should have worked out for the record. And who gets to choose?
Carlos, I'm curious, we talked about a visit, obviously, at some point. Does authorizing this, put us in a path of it's approved and then we're just, I mean, I know we have to approve these conditions, but I'm wondering, is it worth even voting on this until we've kind of done that, or is that still out of the page?
No, that's still a possibility for the commission to visit the site. You do have time to do so. It's difficult for us to try to coordinate that site visit in there. I'd recommend if you have an opportunity to do so to drive independently.
We can, I think we were ideally hoping to go on a day that they were cultivating. And whether we all go independently, that's fine. I'm fine with that, but maybe we can get that notice. I guess I'm of the opinion, I'd rather do that before we progress on this. It doesn't sound like we're locked in, but why go down that road yet?
Okay.
Director.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell the commission that I have a friend who lives not far from their existing plant. And I called him and asked him if he knew of any problems. And he said they're one of the best in the business and they've never had a problem down in Rock Hill that he's aware of. He lives not far from there. So I just wanted to pass that information on to everybody for what it's worth.
Is anybody from the commission driven by?
Yeah, I took a drive past the Rock Hill location, I believe 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure if it was a cultivation day or not. There was an odor. Granted, I drove down the street and I think it might have been during lunchtime, so people were coming and going from the building. I can imagine that that just when the door is opening and closing, that probably had a greater effect on it. But the further you got away from it, it dropped off pretty exponentially. I went across there's a condominium complex across the river or creek, whatever it is. And I would say the odor was about half as intense across the creek. But
Approximately how far for you?
Where I drove, so when I first went by, I drove right in front of it. So if we were looking at our site plan here. Yeah, go to our site plan. Because I'll give you relatively where I was probably further away than the houses are.
I'll
To
get
the
a-
price location.
I'm going to stop the share real quick and I'll get an aerial.
Okay.
Put in place here. Bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, no rush there. So yeah, I drove
This is
right
really
down
right.
Rock Hill Industrial Court. Turned and came back. Then if you go north, scroll a little north. Yeah, there's a little creek there and then there's some apartments. I would say the odor was about half as intense by the time you get there, but it was still detectable. But as where your cursor is, if I followed that little street, by the time I got to the exit, the smell of the fresh mulch was greater than the odor. Yeah, go ahead.
Any idea what the wind direction is?
It was coming from the south.
It was, okay.
Yeah, it was southwest, so. Yeah, it was headed right. That's why I went there, because I could tell the wind was headed that direction.
I've heard some horror stories, not horror stories, but I've heard that some of these places really generate some significant complaints.
Well,
You know, not in this area, but in other areas. And the only thing I would be careful, I want to be careful of is, you know, there could be an odor that may not be harmful, but it still could be a nuisance. You know, so if we do employ a third-party industrial hygienist, you know, to come out and look at it, they might sample and say, you know, everything's below any exposure guidelines, but there's still an odor. And, you know, so it's, what I want to know too is, you know, odor mitigation plan sounds like you're getting rid of the odor. But are we just going to be allowing this to happen on a regular basis? We have a lot of residential, you know, homes right in that area. And if this isn't really eliminating the odor, are we really just giving it a almost like an air permit to allow them to generate a nuisance odor? And you know, that's some of my concerns, you know, how we're going to address this. I think it'd be great use for the building, you know, and I think it wouldn't be, you know, a great establishment, you know, for it, as long as we don't have this nuisance odor that we can't do anything about after the fact.
I mean, I know we have the yearly check and we have things we do, but, you know, and I agree, it'd be awesome for the building. It sounds like a perfect use.
Right.
So, and that's kind of where I was going. Is I'm completely open to it. I wanted to visit and I'm happy to do it myself. I'll do it this weekend, but I was hoping for a cultivation too.
Exactly. So we know what day, you know, go ahead.
If I may, I agree with everything that you've said. I do think it makes sense for us to visit so that we can independently get a sense for how significant this issue is. And if we decide it's okay, you know, we're just some members of the community. Obviously, if you're living next to it, you may have a different perspective. And if it's permeating your clothes and your carpeting and your drapes, that may be a different story. But if we can get comfortable that the odor is within reasonable bounds, my understanding, and this is culminating in a question for Carlos, but my understanding is this special use permit can be revoked. And as a result, if we put this business in place and we find that either the mitigation methods aren't working or aren't being taken seriously, we have the threat of pulling the special use permit as the motivation for them to be creative in working with us to take those odor levels down significantly. Is that your understanding as well?
That is correct. The special permit use can be withdrawn or pulled in the process. Of course, the
Okay.
process, there is a procedure and process to justify and then submit evidence that it's in violation
Right.
of that. And it's not supposed to be an easy process for either party because there are some assurances there.
And they're investing in the property and
Mhm.
developing it to do what they need to do with it. I guess that's what I'm thinking. If we get over that initial hump by satisfying ourselves, the smell isn't seemingly that bad. You know, we put ourselves in the shoes of a neighbor and think, okay, I could tolerate this. If we find out ultimately that we're wrong, there is a method to fix it, albeit a, you know, one that requires significant process, but still there is a method to solve the problem if neighbors come to us with evidence and document over time this is a real problem, if there's a method to solve the problem.
But I think, again, I think it'd be worthwhile, I think as Brian's more, to know what their schedule is.
I
so
agree.
that when we go visit.
We get an accurate sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't have them button up the hatches and then have us come over. Right.
You know, just so we can understand.
I agree fully, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Because to me, it sounds like they're saying two things. We know we're going to have an odor. We're going to give you the filtration system we give everybody, which still gives an odor. But if you get an odor and you get too many complaints, we'll give you a better filter for less odor. Is-
And
is-
I think
Am I
that-
understanding that
no,
correctly?
No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
okay.
I think you're tilting the discussion, based on what they put together, which we're kind of assessing at this point, is that right now, you're partially correct. I mean, they're proposing to provide mitigation improvements to the building. Now, those improvements have not been identified, so it could be, as you've indicated, or it could be above and beyond. I cannot tell you at this point in there, and I think the petitioner could probably address that more efficiently than what I can. Then it indicates that they would share that data with the city to review and approve, and also authorize or allow a third-party consultant to assist us in that process. So I think that right there would then address, that the concerns you have at that, because that should move us in a positive direction. And then ensure that that work's performed by qualified contractors and things of that nature and such. And that is all part of that first component of the odor mitigation plan. The second component, I think it kind of talks about what the commission's been referring to, is about, how are those, is it just a description of a process of how to call and register a concern or complaint to that? I look at that, and that they also added, the analysis component, the sharing with the city, and the agreement to conduct annual reviews to see if it needs more. And now, again, this is the starting point, but I just want to make sure, because of the three phases of this plan, it seems like, they're there. We're just kind of, taking a look at what is a possible next step beyond that, or is that sufficient? And I think the questions I've heard and comments, are interesting to have a discussion with the petitioner.
So I just want to make sure I understand some of what you were saying. So our odor mitigation plan as it stands right now doesn't have specific standards for can an odor be emitted at all.
Right.
So if some odor is emitted, but less than whatever the standard is for such things, if there are such things, is that okay? Like, is a little bit of odor okay? Or are we saying 0 in residential? Now, some odor will be out there. It's in an industrial building. That's its purpose.
Right.
Okay? So the question is, by the time it reaches residential areas, are we,
Fringing of,
Or
it's not no longer the industrial park.
It's gonna be, there's gonna be odors emitted from industrial. That's
Well,
what
I mean,
industrial parks
food
are.
places,
Right.
most of it, so I mean, there's gonna be odor, just a
There's gonna be
question of how
odors.
much and.
But how much is okay? I mean, that's always whenever you're examining standards, say for industrial use. And one of the problems is defining, how much light is okay, or how much odor is okay, or how much noise is okay. I mean, you need to have some definition, not just processes saying, well, if it smells one day, you call this number.
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do about it? I mean, that you need to say, well, you need to stay below this number. That's what we'll call it,
Is it,
or something like that.
is it even measurable? I mean, I don't know. I don't understand odor like in that regard.
I don't,
Like
I have
light,
no
we can
idea.
measure them and, like.
So, I mean, unless you measured with terrapins, but if you use a photoionization detector, like I think they were talking about, that won't necessarily get you down.
I think it's unfortunately a lot of this is subjective, where
Yeah.
it's light, I mean, everything's subjective, of course, but light, somebody could, EPA could say 20 XYZ and that's it. But odor, and also some people may love the odor. And
Exactly.
you might be a
That's-
super smeller and I might not smell it at all. Like,
Right.
That's the
Maybe
thing,
more.
odor's subjective.
You know, people smoke and there's an odor.
But we can hypothesize and we can go down different rabbit holes, you know,
there.
however, but before we do that, I'm curious. You know, have you checked with, where's this out again? I forgot. Rock Hill. Have you checked with Rock Hill to see what their experience was?
Yeah, we've had the discussions with them, and I know that they were, along with the petitioner, in the process of trying to mitigate some issues and concerns that they had received.
They hit the press.
Yeah, and predominant winds, you know, are from the west here, you know, and so it would lead right into that neighborhood. You know, with even of Rock Hill, I'm not sure, you know, what's just east of that. It appeared to be like they had some buffer.
Oh, yeah, a lot of buffer compared to Price.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the closest I got to the Rock Hill building is where the houses would have been next to the Price location.
Right.
So I don't, yeah, I mean, we could maybe look at that and just count how many houses are in that radius. I mean, it's a lot. The houses are a lot closer at the Price location than Rock Hill. There's a lot of them.
And we're gonna have all these new apartments right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
On both
At
sides
least
of
they're
Olive.
south, you know, but you still have winds from the north. you know.
I'd like to hear from the petitioner.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
And when, before that, and one of the things that, you know, I think it was important of what I heard also is that the odor itself is not a noxious or a harmful odor that would have some type of common scale or measurement to. It's just a bad or foul odor of some sort in there, but not enough to, you know, again, to injure or hurt or so. It's not like the sriracha plant or something like that. You've heard
Right.
those types of stories in there. So therefore, you know, so typically you know, on the planning side, you have that formal scale where you can have something measurable, and if it's in there, it's bad. If it's below that, it's good. But this is more below that good, and it's just, it is it's recognizing that there is an odor. It's not a harmful odor. It just smells bad. It sounds like, and that there truly isn't a measurable to that in there. And the way the current zoning code, you know, if they were coming in and applying for the permits, the way the current code operates would be if the odors were significant enough that to cause concern by the residents and the city to take actions, it becomes a nuisance. And that is a difficult process in there to try to justify, because the city has to build the case in there, and you know, the way it's looked at is that it's up to us to prove that in there, and it's always difficult to try to do.
Hey, Carlos, can I ask a question in that regard? I'm sorry to interrupt. but
No,
just
go ahead.
it's timely with what you're talking about. The way I'm reading section 400.1200, it says the city reserves full discretion to deny any application or to revoke any approval based upon a finding that an established special permit usage has become unsuitable and incompatible with its surroundings. That seems to be separate and apart from the nuisance ordinance. This is just full discretion at any time. We can pull it
Yeah,
back.
I wouldn't go to that extent of that at any time. I think we still have to create a paper trail of what that issue
Well, we
is.
say full discretion.
Mhm.
I mean, in my world, that means for any reason or no reason, you can just pull it. I guess I'm trying to compare that to what you're describing, which is seemingly a more arduous process of
Correct.
of revoking. This seems not to require that significant an undertaking.
Correct. And that's why in discussions with the petitioner, they were willing and quickly noted, you know, when we were approached that, hey, you know, we have interest in there, but we know it generates an odor. And we would like to establish a means in the process to address that. And again, to, at least in my opinion, this puts us in a better position to try to control and mitigate those odors as it would be if they just pursued the process without the special permit. Now, again, I welcome more input to make this a better product in there, but I think the goal here was that we were going to, the city was going to be able to interject, itself within this process and put up some standards that to assist us in mitigating those issues. In there.
Has there been any presentation at all with the neighborhood? Have they been informed?
Yes, they actually did they did have a meeting with neighborhood representatives. I'm not sure of it. I think they did it during one of the neighborhood association meetings. And then I know they did some other reach out to individual property owners also. So.
Just seems to me that we need to get out there and put it to the smell test. And that's going to put everything
Exactly.
in context for this, right? If it's minor, then maybe we don't have any of these concerns. If it's major, it's a totally different story.
Right.
Is what they're offering to do with us similar to or exactly what they have put into an arrangement with Rock Hill?
I don't know if the changes incorporate these. I think this is above and beyond of when they approach Rockville. Now they may be incorporated now that they've had some issues in there, but I think they were kind of past the facilities design and odor mitigation that you have up here. We would be part of that process over there.
Be good to bring additional.
All right, Mr. Pennington, I'm going to promote you to a panelist, and if you can state your name and introduce yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. John, you're on.
Hi, folks. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all the discourse. I just took a few pages of notes. So,
Good, good.
and I guess for the record, my name is John Pennington. I'm the founder and CEO of New Growth Horizon. We do business as Proper Cannabis here in St. Louis and the greater Missouri state. Listen, hearing all the questions, this is exactly why we're here, is to put this front and center. When we first met with Barb and Carlos a few months ago, they indicated that this was a permitted use, by your zoning ordinance and law. And we said, great. Hey, we want you to know that this will happen. People will talk about odor the same way you guys are talking about odor on the panel. It is subjective. And it could be great for some, it could be a nuisance to others. A couple things to kind of remind ourselves that this was the medical marijuana program was voted on, by nearly 70% by the state of Missouri in 2018. We at Proper Cannabis, our facility in Rock Hill was the cultivation design of the year and the cultivator of the year in the state of Missouri by our peers. We were the company of the year, as well as we achieved 2 products of the year by our peers. This is a big investment for us. We have a contract with non-refundable money, and we're set to close on the property May 24th. Couple questions, I think, are responses to questions. Since January 13th, we've received 13 phone calls from individuals in Rock Hill, and 8 or 9 of the calls were from 3 of the same individuals. So there's been about 6 different people who have called us since January 13th. We have been renting a photo ionization detection piece of equipment that detects kind of volatile organic compounds that measures, to the parts per million and parts per billion. These are non-harmful products. I think the reason why it is subjective is because we've all smelled marijuana. We're familiar with cannabis, and there's a genuine curiosity about it because it's new. I think at a panel a few weeks ago, people talked about the brewery. Our one of our largest employers in the region emits massive odor. Do you like it or not? I don't know. Do you like the smell of mulch or not? I don't know. We're not here to convince or deny. We're here to say, hey, this is what we do. This is likely what's going to happen. And we have processes in place that allow for transparency and discussion. We were approved by the state of Missouri as one of the highest scored applicants, and I think our resume speaks for itself. Our intention is to design a building that is state of the art, no different than our design at our Rock Hill facility currently. We will take on improvements of what we've learned from the last design, no different than any new construction project. We'll learn from mistakes and we'll improve. Technology improves, equipment improves. We've got a great filter system now, but to somebody's point, there will never be zero odor, ever. So I do not want to mislead anybody and assume that there can be a zero detection mitigation plan. I would not say that, and you could invest 7 figures into a odor mitigation plan that would never reduce this to a zero mitigation procedure. So, we are happy to show you our facility. It probably won't change your opinion, other than verify that we are a company that has values and stands by doing things what we call the proper way. But we do have some business decisions to make. I know the seller is getting very anxious about this property. There's been some challenges with existing tenants in the building, and all of which is public record. The seller is motivated to sell. We are motivated to buy. We have deadlines with the state of Missouri. So the implications are real, in that if we don't perform with the state, there's a possibility of revocation of license. I don't think that would be the case, but I just want to communicate from the timetable perspective that we do have milestones that we have to reach. The question posed about a third-party hygienist, we currently use a company called Tri-Rinse. They are a locally owned and operated environmental control and chemical company down in South City. We would likely use them, and they have issued third-party reports to Rock Hill. Rock Hill did not have an original permitted use in their zoning code back in 2018 and 2019. So what we've been doing with Rock Hill is a version of what we've provided in our special use kind of application. And we will likely go back to Rock Hill for a request of a zoning, use under the same kind of jurisdiction. They've been great to work with. They would tell you that they've received complaints. And I think that they would tell you that we've done everything in our capabilities to improve the situations, but also be objective in our ability to respond to people, so you can eliminate some of that subjectivity, right? So you bring up great points. None of them are perfectly right or wrong. But again, I think it's why we're here. And I'm happy to answer more questions.
Anybody have any questions?
I maybe have a comment if I may. Yeah. John, thanks very much for that thoughtful explanation. Well, a question that I have, I'm putting myself in the shoes of one of the residents, and I think although we try to do our best to notify folks when things are happening, particularly nearby, I think it might make sense for us to reach out to those neighbors who are going to be most directly impacted and let them know that we're going to go on a trip over to Rock Hill to experience this, and maybe invite them to join us, so that if there are issues that they have, we hear about them now, rather than agreeing to this. John spends a lot of money and invests in this development only to find that there are 12 neighbors who scream bloody murder. They may be 12 folks who have no concern about this, in which case maybe everybody's happy. Right. You know, yeah, Carol, sorry.
Yeah. Which I certainly want to hear it would be a neighborhood's reaction to this. And I'm glad that they've had previous discussion with the developer about them. But I think that if they're going to have some sort of reaction that we need to know about, this is the forum, for it, not a field trip to Rock Hill.
Well,
If they have, I think it's something we all need to hear from them together. And this is a place where that should take place.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Maybe I didn't articulate that clearly enough. I'm simply saying we should go out of our way to alert them that they have an opportunity to go and understand what this is going to be, so that then they can come here to the next meeting and be heard about their concerns if they have it. And if I were one of those homeowners, and just this wasn't on my radar because I was busy and I was going to work, and I missed it, only to find that the building's been built and the smells are streaming into my window, and then I have a problem. I think that's worse. New owners that move in, they're going to move in with knowledge that it's there, and they're going to make that decision in real time. These are the folks that potentially are being tread upon, and I feel like we need to go out of our way to make sure that they receive this notice and have an opportunity to really check it out, maybe in more than a way than we typically would. And maybe that's just sending them a mailer, whatever. But I do think we should maybe go the extra mile, because what we're considering here impacts them so much more than anybody else. We were making a decision for them, and I feel like they should be at the table with us, expressing their concerns in this form.
So I listen, I think I'll follow your guys' lead on this. My background is, real estate development, and, obviously getting public input is crucial. We did reach out to the neighborhood. I attended one of the board meetings on a Saturday. This was included on their agendas for their general association meetings. I think, at the end of the day, you get 7 adults in a room and you're never going to unanimously agree on any topic, right? You go, poll 100 of the neighbors and you're going to get a version of what you guys have communicated up there. I would say, hey, in your natural zoning and approval process between here and I know we still have to get to city council, what is the necessary sequence of events to make sure that people are properly notified? Really what we would like is some assurance on whether or not you believe we're going to be a right business partner and employer and all of that. Because we currently employ 150 people in Rock Hill, and we've invested, $17 million in this facility, in a business that has a lot of, stipulations federally that make it difficult. And I'm not looking for a plea bargain here. It's just being very transparent that we don't have the ability to please everybody. We have to present the facts. And, if what we're trying to do is help you better understand that this is a permitted use that your zoning code allows. So at some point, when was that decision made that you could have a dispensary or cultivation or manufacturing? And I just want to make sure that we're not required to do things that we can't do that implicate us further with the real estate in the state of Missouri. And I'm not, trying to be difficult here. It's just letting you guys know some of the timetables that we have.
Hey, John, I think there was another question, Brian.
Well, no, and I was just gonna say, I agree with everything you're saying. The only concern I have is how it would be presented. We don't want to present it as a problem, because that wouldn't be fair to them. And you've been outstanding in your forthcomingness, and I appreciate that. It sounds like great to work with. I think everyone just wants, nobody wants to be hearing complaints. You don't, we don't. But I think having a great business partner is also a win. So it's tough, because I agree giving people the visibility, but not in, and I don't think you're suggesting this at all, but making sure we're not saying, hey, is this
Sure,
a
yeah,
problem?
right.
But how do we do that tactfully? Again,
No.
yeah.
Has there been a mailer sent out?
Yes,
Carlos?
if I can note a
Please, yeah.
couple of things. So prior to our first meeting at the beginning of March, we send out notifications, and we exceeded the 300 foot radius. We made sure that we had the subdivision fully informed and received postcards in there and how to access the information online. We coordinated for Mr. Pennington to meet with representatives of the subdivision association and to schedule to be on one of their annual, one of their subdivision meetings as a whole, which they did to do so. And then, I mean, we've been here for a while, so we knew other people to call within that area. Especially not put you in the spotlight, but we called, and she lives right behind that property. Some of the business owners too, just to kind of note the interest in there. And then regardless of what next steps the commission takes, we are required to do another notification before this goes to council for a public hearing. So, there are those multiple levels that are in there. If we go back to and look at it, at it two ways. One, we can issue out notices again. There's no problem with us doing so. But I think ultimately, if there was something that I wanted our citizens to be informed of based on what actions are taken in here, is what is the process for them to know that there is going to be a number available, that you can make the calls, that they're quarterly reviewed, then they're annually reviewed with the city and things. Because I again, based on what actions the commission takes, that is a crucial part, and I don't want that to get lost in the other parts of notification in there. Second to that would be, what would be most effective for the commission? We send a general postcard and direct the individual to the website. For the council, we send out a hearing notice and then provide a little bit more detail in that notice. They actually get a letter in there, and we generally just do it on a general mail. We don't do anything special or sign on there. So we're hoping that yes, that people will review or read what the contents that are in there and such. And then with our communications manager, we've improved our methods of getting just information out and sending out, social media blasts and things of that nature too.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. That I think addresses my concern.
Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that uses that generate some noise, okay, that's what, we put them in the industrial park. That's what you're supposed to do in industrial park. And the uses in industrial park may generate smells. That's what they're supposed to do, but that's why I put them in the industrial park. So, I mean, I think, so, on one hand, I don't want to put something in there that's going to generate something that's really harmful to the neighbors. But on the other hand, it's, you can't deny the nature of what an industrial park is and what's supposed to do. And because if you have a use that generates smells and noise, it should be an industrial park. Well, that's where they're going. And if you happen to live next to the industrial park, that's kind of the circumstances that you choose. So on one hand, I'm concerned about the neighbors. I'm concerned about me. I don't really want to smell them either. But on the other hand, if they are in the industrial park And they're doing everything they can to mitigate the smell. We know it's not going to be zero, but they have a line, you know, for neighbors to complain. And we have a way to, you know, for an industrial hygienist to come in and give a report. That's really, they're doing a lot. And I think that's really admirable for an industrial use to come into any city and say, we're going to do all these things and we want to go in your industrial park. Well, that's where we're supposed to go. You know, what else are you going to do? They're not saying I want to be next door to your residential house, Carol. I mean, they're going where they're supposed to be. And
Let me ask a question though, to John. John, I mean, you only have the other facility at Rock Hill, correct?
Yes, yeah, we cultivate and manufacture there. So, and here we would just cultivate.
Okay, okay. And that's got a pretty good, it's got some buffer around you. And it's not necessarily right up against the residential houses. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the commissioners, and I can't see your name tags, mentioned that he was at the apartments or condominiums behind. There is a creek and some woods that kind of, you could argue, act as a natural buffer. You know, the industrial park itself is decently contained. It's pretty small. There's only maybe 8 to 10 buildings back there. But, you know, by way of the crow flies, we're probably, you know, a few hundred feet in either direction. You know, max. I mean, our building is the furthest kind of west. So, you know.
No, I get it, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt it. I apologize.
And you know what? Listen, we've had complaint night. Well, that's one of the reasons why we ask people to identify where they're calling from, what time of the day, where the wind is blowing, and you know, it gets back to the subjective. It allows us to collect data, and then what we can do is we can use our detector to determine and showcase that, hey, we did this. It gives us a reason to have a conversation. What we don't want is people complaining without a response, or people complaining and not feeling heard. That's what we like to avoid, right? Nobody wants to complain and complain. You'll get some of that. And I think part of that, you know, candidly, is probably people who are against this type of business. And I can't argue with that either. So that's human nature, I guess, right? So we just try to be objective. We try to be transparent. We try to give people a platform to converse with us. We have a process to respond to them. You create a discourse with the city. We submit a plan that showcases our design. We hire people who are professionals. You know, there's nothing more that I can do.
Well, John, I'm curious about, you know, all the data that you already have.
Yeah.
Like, for example, you've gotten, where do you get your complaints from? What part? How far away?
You know, I would rather not go on the record and say people, but we've had a police officer complain coming home from church on Manchester.
Gotcha. No, I'm kind of looking for, you know,
I would say we've had we've had people on Crawford. They typically the people who have complained have been your random driver-bys on Manchester or McKnight.
So more transient people just driving by.
Yeah, but that's why I want to be sensitive to just, you know, people's privacy, but that's what you talk about. So, you know, if a year from now we get complaints, we sit down with Carlos and staff and say, hey, we got 4 phone calls and it was somebody from here, and here, or it could have been the same person. It could have been 4 different people, you know, and ultimately you have discussions of what does this mean? Did you
So-
respond back? Right?
So John, so if you had, I totally understand what you're talking about, the complaints along Manchester and McKnight. But if you did have a complaint, let's say at Crawford, and you received it, what did you do? And have you made any other changes to your facility since it's been in operation?
Yeah, great question. So we would ask, Mr. Chairman, can you describe to us, we'd first field a phone call. Can you tell us why you're calling? We'd ask them if it caused any nuisance. How is this disturbing you? How can we better help you? Here, we would describe our process to them. What we've done a couple of times, we've done some additional sealing to our facility within, I know this sounds weird, just little nooks and crannies and cracks to avoid normal emission. We've added additional filters. We have, made doorways tighter, but doors open up, so we have a more or less a negative pressure system. So air typically comes in. Well, what happens when you open a door? Air comes out. So we would just use it as an opportunity to have just a normal human conversation and talk about us, invite them in, try to be just sensitive to their call. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think
No, that's good. No, it's perfect.
that's just kind of the process, I guess.
And I'm curious about just kind of if there's a way that we could get maybe, the addresses or approximate addresses for these complaints, just to kind of see the radius of potential, whether they're more serious complaints. And then kind of compare that and just kind of look at how many houses would be within that range to just get our arms around it, as
Talk
well.
about existing in Rock Hill or as we go forward.
Well, if we take the data from Rock Hill, we can kind of probably get an idea of the range of potential complaints that are arising in Rock Hill.
So what
Then we
would,
could take that distance and then kind of make a circle or, around to kind of see just how many homes potentially could be.
Kind of say
what would
like an
that
overlay.
do for
Yeah.
us?
Some idea of how,
Gives us an idea
of
of
what
the
we're,
impact.
what we may hear about. And how often do you cultivate?
Regularly. We cultivate our harvest are on 8-week cycles. So we'll have harvest typically twice a month. Sometimes 3 times a month, sometimes once a month. Kind of depends on the time of the year, but regularly and consistently.
Click your mic on.
Thanks. I'm sensitive, and I think Carol made a really good point that we're talking about the industrial area, and industrial things happen in the industrial area. To some extent, if you buy next to the industrial area, you're going to get some stinks sometimes. That's just kind of the way it goes. I think there's a threshold beyond which that argument breaks down. If there's a sulfur processing plant that's spewing sulfur stink, that
It's
may
heavy
be
industrial areas.
that may-
and then
yeah,
there's light
exactly.
industrial areas.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think going back to I think we should have a visit and get a sense for which category this falls into, the clearly obnoxious or the typical industrial. And if it falls into the latter category, the typical industrial, I'd be in favor of moving them along the process.
Right.
But I think it all hinges on getting out there and getting our sniff on, and see whether it smells or not. I don't think that I understand what you're trying to accomplish by doing that mapping, but at the end of the day, people could be complaining because, as John said, they have a bias against this kind of business, or, they have they're great.
And the
Who
buildings might
knows?
be different. Building might be more higher quality here. versus
Who
there.
knows?
The wind is different.
yeah.
What I was trying to get at is, we're gonna do this, reports on a quarterly basis,
Right.
reviews on an annual basis.
Yeah.
So just trying to think ahead as to what would that review
Yeah.
consist of? And that would, personally, I would think you'd map out where the complaints are.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thinking is, let's kind of see what that process is like.
Yeah.
And maybe even seeing an example of one of their industrial hygienist reports.
Yeah,
Just so we can get an idea of, these guys have the experience.
Mhm.
We just need to get comfortable with it.
yeah, I guess my personal view on the, what are we calling it? The odor mitigation plan and all that. It sounds very nice, but the fact of the matter is, once the fox is in the hen house, the fox is in the hen house, and we're not going to take them out. And if there are complaints, I mean, it sounds to me, and John, I don't mean to say this in an offensive way, genuinely, but it sounds to me like this process is more about making people feel heard and feel good about their complaint being, fully exercised, than really fixing the problem, because there's only so much you can do. You can't fix the problem. Maybe new technology comes out. John's going to implement that anyway because he's a good business owner. But for the most part, the call center and the program is really just to make everyone feel like their feelings have been accommodated. So I think we need to go out, smell this thing, see how noxious it is. And if it's not that noxious and we think it's appropriate for light industrial, then it goes into the light industrial.
John, when are you going to be cultivating over the next week or so? So that we
I'll
all-
have to check our schedule, but I would suspect we'll have a harvest certainly in the next couple of weeks. I think we may have had one on Monday. So happy to share that. We're on a pretty regular schedule. We try to harvest on Mondays.
As much as I'd like to go on a harvest, it would be nice to go also on an off day, because if that's.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, you know what? It's not always the harvest days. So actually think about we've got 14,000 in the facility at any given time, from little clones to moms to flowering plants. So a lot of the smell is emitted after the harvest when the flower is moving, when it's being transported, right? When it's being handled. It's like, an orange, right? You can smell an orange, but once you peel it and you open it up, you can smell it more, right? So those terpenes, no different than any other plant or organic compound, will emit a smell. So, and Commissioner, I think, you said something, and you kind of mentioned, hey, I'm not trying to be offensive. You're exactly right. I mean, we cannot create a plan that has zero mitigation, and there is an element of this process that showcases that we're doing the right thing, and we're here to listen. We're here to improve. But there's certain people that will never satisfy, right? And I apologize. I've got 4 kids under the age of 11 back here. They're getting ready for tags. And it's funny, my son just walked in from hockey practice. He goes, "What's that smell?" And I have no idea what he was talking about, but it wasn't about this.
Well, if we don't have any more comments, I think we've really talked this thing through, and we really appreciate it. But maybe we should take on or see if there's any public comments.
I have one question for
Go ahead,
Carlos.
Jody. I
Which
apologize.
subdivisions were notified?
We did everybody.
Everybody within a 300 foot radius and all of. I don't
I thought it
know
was
the map.
all north of Alice.
Yeah,
Was the new apartment complex?
Because we weren't notified.
It would have gone now. I know Hilltop Manor is in the listing, and there are postcards
Yeah,
with the
I
information.
didn't see one.
This is the challenge.
I mean,
To the
just
point of maybe a
saying one
second,
that lives right there.
it's like,
okay. You haven't received it?
Mm-mm.
I could have sworn out, it was like if Jody lived up there, then she's gonna get it.
Those cards are a little thin and they get stuck to somebody else's
And
mail.
the US mail is not as dependable as it once was.
We had the same issue with
I'm just was curious because
across the street here, some claims where they weren't received. And they're hard stock postcards.
I mean, we get the, the month by monthly slick covered thing, all of that news. So I know we get email and all of that.
So can I ask one more question of Mr. Pennington?
Mhm.
Because I agree with Carol, although I'm not supposed to be speaking, that you're gonna be in the industrial park, but how long? I mean, my first concern was environmentally, is that air safe? You've clarified that. How long does this odor remain typically, when you harvest, remain in the air for a smell, even mild or hard or whatever? If you're measuring things, what do you got in any data on that?
That's a question to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm there every day. And some days I'm immune to it, and there's other days I smell it, and other days I don't. So it's not perfectly clear. I don't want to mislead you with a response that sounds perfect or calculated. I think we use that detector to be able to determine whether or not it has any harm. So, and the reality is it doesn't. Now, how do you measure a subjective opinion on smell? I don't know. And again, that's why we are putting this issue front and center.
Good. So I think now is probably a good time for some public comments. I think we have an audience member. Like to speak.
Okay, Chairman, I ask you just to bear with me 1 second before starting
Okay.
the discussion.
Remember to state your name and address for the record. Thank you. Very good.
Bear with me 1 second. Barb.
I'll date myself.
We'll just assume you saw the rerun.
Yeah. Are we ready? Am I on? Barbara Grenzick, 1217 Olivet Drive. I spoke at a meeting about a month ago, but I wanted to just give you a little bit of information about me so that you know where I'm coming from. Is that I've been a resident of Olivet since '82, in that house since '82. Although I'm retired, I was previously the facility manager and safety officer for Isto Technologies, which was here in town. And we dealt a lot with smells internal to the building because it was a chemistry lab. My degree is in chemistry and facilities. So I'm very, aware of the type of smells and that would probably be noticed. Now, I have been talking with my neighbors, most of whom have questions that are the usual questions. What's it going to, how long will it smell? Is it bad? We really don't know. And even if you drive around, driving right by the building in Rock Hill isn't going to tell you what it's like 200 feet away. It's not, because it could be, one would assume it's strongest at its source, that the winds will blow it away. But I am more than willing to continue talking to my residents. Some of them, it's a very mixed area. Many of them are Asian and will not or won't speak English, so I can't get to them. I can't. Some, really don't care. They say, it's not going to bother me. Don't talk to me. But I have been promoting it, telling them they can come up here. That that personally, I said I can't imagine the city doing something and allowing a business that would have anything harmful. And I know this is not harmful. Would be a nuisance, which is so difficult to address because even if you overlay your maps you're mapping the complaints, and the people, not necessarily where the odors were. And especially if some of the odors are from people driving by. It skews all of the data completely. So I feel sorry that they have to, I understand why they have to do it, but having only 6 complaints since January, I think is from 6 people. I think there were 13 complaints. He said having 6 or 7 people involved is, I think it's pretty doggone good for a business that is operating continually. Yeah, you might say the one benefit would be, gee, if they all come from this side of town, then you'd say, okay, well, it must definitely be the winds. But I can't imagine anything worse though, and within about last year or 2 years ago, that same facility, but out in the parking lot, there was a truck fire. And I was inside the house and smelled the smoke. You can smell it. And I looked outside and this black smoke is billowing up over the building. And I ran down the street just to let my neighbors know. And 2 of them just said, we don't care. And they shut the door. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. I was nosy. I ran around Price Road to find out what the heck was going on. But a lot of people now the people at Hilltop Manor are higher than we are. So whether any of the smoke or any of the smells would go up higher into there, I don't know. But I know, mostly the wind comes from the northwest, and probably end up away from the heavy residential areas. But anyway, I just wanted to say I still support it. If it's okay that I can continue talking to residents, I will. I would say
Please do.
cards, I bet maybe only 10% of the people even look at the cards because they don't know what it is and they just kind of throw it away. That doesn't mean you don't do it. You don't try and let them know what's going on, but don't expect a high number of people to respond. But that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Do we have any hands raised?
No, there are none, but if there is anybody that would like to speak before the commission on there, if you can show your, click the raise hand, it's in the lower part of the Zoom screen and I can transfer you over. Okay, Chairman, I see none.
Okay. Well, John, if you can, send us some of that additional information, or especially when you're going to be cultivating, because I think, like many of us, I know I'm anxious to kind of drive by and check it out and kind of know what part of the cycle, this time is, so that would be fantastic. And if we can get maybe some copies of some of those complaints, just so we can kind of see what we might, be seeing ourselves if we have this. I would love to see a report from Dryly too, just to kind of see how that works. Anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate you coming on and appreciate all your candidness and discussing this with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Carlos, what are the next steps?
Next scheduled commission. The next scheduled commission meeting would be Thursday, April 21st.
So am I under the impression that you guys want some further clarification before you take this to a vote?
I think, if I may, I think one thing that we want is to go out and experience it. So I think that's a request we made last time. It didn't come to fruition for one reason or another, but I think we'd like to get over there and use our olfactory senses to get a sense for how significant the smell is. And that, I think, is going to give us, frankly, I think it's going to give us the comfort we need to move forward.
Exactly.
Okay. Carlos, if you want to come up with a list of questions or recommendations, certainly we'll follow your lead.
Go over individually. I apologize, John. I didn't mean to, but I was talking about
I
scheduling.
think initially we thought it was gonna be coordinated, but it doesn't sound like that's possible. So if we need
Yeah.
to do individual, we'll make it, I'll commit to get there in the next 2 weeks.
I
Yeah,
will too.
same.
Okay.
And I just would like to know, when's the harvest?
But honestly, I actually think I might go on a random day and then someone else in the harvest. That way it's good to kind of set it, because that's reality.
I would like to kind of get a view of both.
Yeah, that's true.
My concern is that we're not gonna have a harvest by the time of the next meeting. Is that right, John?
I'll be able to get you harvest schedules tomorrow. Just, and again, I wouldn't let that dictate opinions or not, but there's constant activity over there. So I think, again, if you want to come over and you want to see the facility, you want to drop in, you want to see what it's like on the inside or the outside, all of which, open market here. So it's just coordination at this juncture. So, Carlos, why don't you and I follow up tomorrow? I'll send you the schedule, and if there's times that work for you and we want to have a session on site, I'm happy to do that too. I'll follow your lead, but would just ask that we can try to keep the timetable somewhat cognizant, because we have legal positions that we don't have the luxury of delaying things forever.
Understood. We appreciate it. Okay.
And Chairman, just to make sure I got a proper understanding of what we're trying to coordinate within, if possible, by the meeting on the 21st. One is individually visit the site, and there we'll get the schedule from John. But please don't let that just preclude you taking a visit at the site, even on 2 different occasions or days or times of the day in there. The other thing, if I understood, a sample of the type of complaint reports that are submitted.
Well,
Or-
yeah, just trying to get an idea. I mean, this mitigation plan
Mhm.
talks about collecting these types of complaints.
Okay.
I'd like to see kind of what that information that they're gonna collect would look like. If we have a complaint and it requires an industrial hygienist to go out, what's that report gonna look like? Kind of, a way to just kind of walk through to see what the process is going to be like if we have to experience that ourselves.
Yeah, because under the current mitigation plan, there is some type of quarterly report that's shared with the community on a quarterly. I guess. There is a written report to the city issued on a quarterly basis, and I'm not sure
No,
that's.
but we can provide a version, probably a redacted version of what, we have, just for, we'll have to just
That's great.
respect privacy of folks, but
Great.
we can provide the letter that we've recently issued to Rock Hill, and a sample of how we collect phone calls. And I think it will make sense, visually, and I would have done that tonight if I was prepared, but no problem.
That, I think would help us a lot, just to get an better understanding of the process.
And then thirdly, the ability to see one of the third-party reports, not
Exactly.
the collection of the phone call logs, but the third-party report.
Yeah, and really, an example of maybe some of the phone call logs would be good. Like I said, just they have the data, the information that they've experienced at Rock Hill, and I think it would be good for us to kind of review.
Carlos, and I would take another look at the special permit and think about on C under Exhibit A, the facility design odor mitigation plan. When we talk about the operator in the city will include a third-party industrial hygienist, I think we should be clear about who's going to hire, how they're going to hire, going to pay the fee. So
John, is that something that Tri-Leaf bills you for right now?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
When Tri-Leaf is called to come out, Do you coordinate that and do they bill you or is that done through Rock Hill?
Yeah, I mean, so again, part of what we've proposed is we field, so I sent, I mean, let me see if I can pull up this email today. So we had a complaint on McKnight a couple of weeks back. And I emailed the fellow from Tri-Rents. I said, hey, just following on the results of McKnight testing, we were going to go a next step and do it on a parts per billion. He said, I'm ready to sample, but last week there was no odors when I was by. And actually, I think that was a harvest. And this week I was out of region. I'll stop by Tuesday through Thursday. So what we'll try to do is we look at when we're fielding the calls, what's happening within our general business procedures, what time of the day it was, where the wind is blowing. And then we'll we can't necessarily get that on real time. If Carlos calls me right now, we got to go to where he is. So what we'll try to do is mirror when Carlos called and replicate a version of the same time he was called. If the facility at our facility with this detection, technology, we can do it on site at any given time, but it still requires somebody to go use the PID. It takes, I think, 5 to 10 minutes to measure. Then you submit that to a third party that then reveals the outcomes of the test. So there's a process. So somebody, my compliance director, security director, and Tri-Rents, they manage that process. So.
No, I appreciate that. But that wasn't specifically my question. I apologize. Maybe I wasn't clear. Who pays for it?
We do.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, we pay for it.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, John, appreciate your time. Unless anybody else has more comments at this time, I think we'll move on. But we look forward to stopping by.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, so we'll move on to discussion items. And it looks like we're on item A, which is comprehensive plan update.
And Chairman, before going into that, because I think looking at the agenda and the contents puts into focus too the way we kind of manage and coordinate the meetings and keeping track of time. There was an email that was sent out in there expressing some concerns on the length of time in there. So what we wanted to do in discussions with the city manager, not put her on the spot, but to kind of get that third party look at some of the things that we can discuss and consider about moving the meetings along a little bit more efficiently. Again, we do what we can to try to expedite a lot of these reviews in there. And I think there's a couple of things that we can also integrate in there, and having that opportunity to discuss those, we can again provide advance notice to our petitioners and applicants, or even calls when they come in, of what that process would be. So if that's okay, we'd like to jump to that discussion before the comprehensive plan.
Sounds great.
We can have this conversation at another meeting. One of the things that came up was that there were the discussion about meetings lasting, 3 hours plus, and we've had a number of those in a row. And, and you all know that meeting length is dependent on, how many items are on the agenda, the complexity, the length of staff or the developer's presentation, length of your discussion, length of the public discussion, and any of these can be any of these will impact how long you guys are here. Other factors that also kind of impact the length are the preparedness of the petitioners and the staff and the commissioners. And then finally, there's actually just managing expectations. If petitioners should know how long they have to speak. so that they prepare for that timeframe. And commissioners should also have an expectation of how long a meeting is going to last, so that when you're coming to a meeting, you know it's about how long it's going to be, so you can be prepared kind of mentally just to be here. I don't really, you talk about the number of items on the agenda. That really doesn't help much with your meeting lengths, because what do is you take one off, you put it on the next meeting, you're just kicking the can down the road, and you're also doing that within the requirements of 30 days or 120 days, and so you're just kind of continue to push that down. And so really it comes to actively managing the agenda and managing the meeting. And I was just going to give you a couple of ideas and thoughts. I think complex issues or first time issues like tonight, they really require a well-written staff report. Because if you look at Carlos's staff report, what he's really doing is trying to focus your attention on the things that he thinks you're going to be making a decision on. And so if you read those reports with that in mind, then you kind of come prepared to talk about those items. Now, we can miss that too. He can miss, because something could pop up. And so it's not made to limit your discussion, but it's made to come in more focused, on your discussion. And I think, he tries, I think he tries to do that.
Very well.
I think limiting the length of a presentations or discussion, the council, you do you have 3 minutes, state your name and address, and, I think that is not. I think that's not doing that has also led to the success of this commission. And I've talked to you before, but what I think as far as, I think people, particularly when they were on Zoom, I think you made people feel very welcome. And, you kind of brought it to them. And so that they felt free to, as an observer again to these meetings, I think that open dialogue is what is really lovely. However, I think you also need to be aware when the dialogue changes into a monologue. And I think, you need to be actually more proactively address those issues when those come up. I don't think, and I think, I think part of the reason you're all very nice and you're, allowing people to speak, but I think it is really okay at some point to say, we got it. We hear what you're saying. That's always a nice way. We hear what you're saying. We'll take that into consideration and sit your butt down. But it is kind of like that. Once somebody goes on and just, because you guys have stopped listening. Once you realize you've stopped listening, cut them off.
We all stop listening at different times.
Mhm. There's a time when you all hit it.
Or I've been kicked under the table by Carol.
Do we all have the option though to tell someone to sit down too? Or
No.
does it need to be from the chair?
I think at any point in time, one of you could say to the chair, I appreciate the comments, but I think we have,
We've heard
I
enough.
think we have heard, I think we have the message. And-
Carol's done that for
Mhm.
me, at times,
Yeah.
just to kind of,
That's part of my job.
yeah.
But,
But if you
but-
guys hear something too,
Yeah.
right, and I think you can also, we should pay more attention to when the discussion is repetitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's true. And again, it's also just having those phrases ready to go in your head so that you're not thinking, what should I say? It's having those phrases in your head that are, oh, thank you. It's a lot nicer than the buzzer. You say, we thank you. We understand. We've heard you. And we'll take that into consideration.
thought we
Or
could
you
play
can also say
music.
that point's been made. And you can also say, if you've got a lot of people, if you've got something on and you've got a lot of people who are waiting to speak, you can say, if you have nothing new, if you have something new to add, please speak.
Mhm.
But if you are just reaffirming what's already been said, let us go through, let's get it through the new ideas first. And that's actually nice for the people who are waiting to speak, because they don't have to sit through 6 people saying the same thing. I also think, you know, the petitioner's staff, the commission, you know, your preparedness is, it's all interconnected. You know, if the petitioner or staff aren't provided information or at a timely fashion, or you don't get information at a timely fashion, or you haven't had, it's gonna be a longer meeting because we're gonna spend more time talking to you. And with that, I think that there's also just a general expectation. I really feel like at this point in time, at a council a while back, not here, and we had someone come and we were doing a retreat with them, and they said, our meetings are too long. Our meetings are all too long. They're going, you know, going 2.5 hours. They're all too long. And the guy said, well, how often do you meet? And he said, twice a month. And he said, your meetings aren't long enough. And it was an expectation. And I think realistically at this point in time, you should expect to have a 2-hour or 2.5 hour meeting. I think being under 2.5 hours is probably going to be lucky when you have an agenda. Now, there are ways you can curtail that. And I think there are some options. I think that one of the things you can do is we have a function on the agenda. I just have a little of what that is. And the idea of this isn't that it sets a stop time. So on this, I test item number 1, start time says 7:10. Item number 2 is 7:30, right? It doesn't necessarily, it's not establishing a stop time, but it's, you know, staff, or if you want staff in the chair can establish, well, how long do you think it's going to take? Carlos pretty much usually can say how long he thinks something's going to take, or how long he thinks it should take. Now, if he thinks something's going to be 20 minutes, it starts at 7:10 and at 7:30, you're still talking. You don't have to stop, but it is an opportunity for you to say, it's 7:30. What would the commission like to do? Would you like to continue speaking, knowing you're going off schedule? Would you like to, have we heard enough, and would we like to just take action? Or third, is there so much more to discuss that we think we should just place this on a future agenda? And that way it kind of gives everybody coming into the meeting, you look at the agenda and you're like, okay, this is a meeting that's going to last how long? 2.5 hours, you know? You see you're on item 2, you know, and you're getting close to 7:30. There's a lot of times, and again, where there's a lot of conversation and you guys are probably ready to vote. And you kind of keep talking. And I think this will help that, or could help that, because you get to 7:30 and it's an actual time where you stop and you think to yourself, okay, where are we really? Are we going to make a decision tonight? Can we make a decision tonight? If we can't, what do we want, you know, what do we need from them to give us? And then you can tell the person, you know, and that is also very nice for other people. So like when you've had these meetings where the issue, the project across the street, they went on for a really long time. And every time they were first, I just cringed. It was like, oh God, they're going to be 3 hours and they're first. But this gives you an opportunity. And you can also say, I mean, that's the other thing. You can say, we can pause discussion now and take it back up at the end of the meeting. You know, I mean, you have options on how you can manage that, but it just gives you that time to sit back and say, oh, we have been talking about this for a while. What should we do? Another option, and these can be, you can pick and choose, you know, is to set clear expectations. One of the things I've noticed, and again, it's been with some of the bigger projects, is where you have asked for information for your next meeting. So like with tonight, John, it's like, you know, what do we really, you know, you kind of trying to summarize, well, what do we want? This is the information that we're going to want, you know. And what has happened on several occasions is that information has been submitted to staff the Wednesday before the commission meeting. And so what happens, and how can you be prepared for a meeting? How can staff prepare for it? How can you prepare for it if the information you requested you get Wednesday night? Now, sometimes that's going to, and like all good rules, there are exceptions. And so, you know, there's always going to be some exception. Something's going to be something, you know, it's really down to the wire on the time or whatever. But often what I hear you say is, well, let's come back at the next meeting. Let's take this up at the next meeting. And this is what we'd like. I think at that point in time, if you could remember, or staff can, and it's actually just Carlos who has it. Well, Don now. You can say to them, or they can say to you, okay, he want him to come back to the next meeting. We want answers to these 2 questions. Carlos, when do you need that by? And then Carlos knows he needs it by, Friday at noon or Thursday, that he can give you the date and a time. You then can reinforce with that petitioner, this is when you need it. That gives you the ability, it raises the level of, of saying, this is really important and it's important enough that we want to have some time to look at it. It also allows Carlos to say, when they turn it in on Wednesday at 3:30, it allows him to say, I'm sorry, I can't take this.
Right.
It was due on this time.
Right.
And you're now going to be pushed to another meeting. And likewise, staff, we are probably too lenient. And when I say we, I'm not, it's Carlos. Probably too lenient on accepting documents that come in late. And you need to just take that up with his supervisor. Or he needs to be a little bit better. There has to be you're holding each other in check.
It's tough because you want to keep things moving. You want to
be nice.
You want to be nice. You want to be nice. And it's important when people are coming to you, it's an important project. There's money on the line typically, and so what's the reputation that we've worked years to try to get rid of is it's not easy to do business and all of that. Well, how do we get rid of that? We are accommodating. If somebody comes in, when Proper Cannabis came in to have a conversation, I could have my fire chief, my, our finance director, I could have a ton of people here because we wanted to say, listen, we're all here, we can help you and get it done. And that's what you guys are trying to do. But at some point too, you have to say, but it's getting in the way of our other business. The other, another option, you kind of use and don't use the consent agenda, and that can be good. It allows you to, you can put in a number of things on the consent agenda. You have the opportunity and then to say, you can review it. You can approve those things all at once. You can take an item out of consent if you like.
Can we approve them all at once? Because last time I thought we had to do it individually.
No, you can, that's the point.
Yeah.
You can put them all together. and
Yeah,
approve
but
it.
And
that's-
it's one approval, you're approving the consent. Yeah, and then you can also take items out. I would though, one of the things, and that has to be worked out between staff and again, the chair, and you have to get in the rhythm. I would also though, if you start seeing yourself do that, if you've got a large percentage of homes coming forward and you're just kind of approving them and there's no comment or changes or anything, why are they coming to you? And I'm in no way, I absolutely know my bounds, and I am not in any way telling you what you should or shouldn't be looking at. But I'm just saying, if you notice that, it's a time to say, hey, why, do we really need to do it this way?
Go ahead. We were actually calling the vote each time. Do we have, before we used to just raise our hands or say aye, or,
Because of the virtual conferencing.
Oh,
I believe it says that we have to do roll call votes.
well,
or
yeah, you have
voice
to do
votes.
roll call votes all the time, don't you?
Council did, but the commission didn't.
Oh, the commission doesn't have to? I mean, if that would be by whatever your rules are that you follow.
But given that we do now the video conferencing, that we informed that the process had to change. And I believe it's under the ordinance that they're.
Oh, that might be, yeah. So that people can hear who's saying aye.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just wasn't sure if we could summarize it at the end, like.
Yeah.
Could we do all say all in favor aye, any opposed no, and then call and then say who said no at that point?
I said to call them.
We can look at that.
There you go.
Come back on that.
I'm-
Yeah,
I like the options, especially the time. I'm curious, like, one of the things I noticed is staff, Carlos and John, do a great job of like preparing good amount of detail that has to go through, because it's your job to go through the detail, look at like this, the storm water, look at, how it's gonna be mitigated, how this, and this. Those aren't usually our comments. I find our comments after the 5 or 10 minute presentation is someone might have issues with the facing or make a recommendation on that, which it makes sense. It's where we are. I'm almost wondering if I am comfortable, and again, I'm probably least educated in that area. I'm comfortable if Carlos in your presentation say, I've reviewed all of this. I'm comfortable with all of this. Do you have any design questions or anything else you want to question? I think it's in our right to question, but I wonder if that would shorten. The work still needs to be done. It's not taken away from the outstanding work in the presentation. It can still be in there. We can read it ahead of time. I'm just wondering if we need to go through that much detail to present to us each time, but I'm,
Some of the detail he provides is educational for all of us.
it is,
Yeah,
but I'm just trying to look at time off.
there's a couple of reasons why you may do some of that. Why you may do some of the kind of redundant discussion, and some of it is for the public. It's letting the people know. Now you can work on maybe a shorter summary, sometimes, or, but you do tend to have kind of a bit of an introduction. And even though it's in, it is written, but then the discussion, the questions that you folks ask afterward, that's up to you, because we
Agreed.
don't in any way want to direct your discussion either.
I just want to make a point. In many ways, Carlos summarizes a lot of what he's given to us in terms of detail. And I think it is important for the public to hear that, because they're not going to read the reports. And it's good to know, it's good for the public to know that our staff has looked at this in detail and has looked at the issue of stormwater and has done this and done that. And they've not done, this thing. So maybe they've got a question about that. I mean, I think it's important to communicate on that.
Well, and I'm not.
You and I may not need to hear it each time, but
Well,
for the person who's never had a new house next to them and has concerns about stormwater and lighting and da, 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 it's good that they hear the report.
I think, and I don't disagree, but I also wonder, it could be that we've looked at stormwater, we've looked at this versus the detail. The reason I'm asking is I don't feel like we often comment on those things. Those aren't the discussion points. It's usually more visual. I'm not in any way suggesting the analysis isn't done. Of course, it has to be done legally. But I was just looking at things that could summarize the summary. if that makes
But if
sense.
everything looks good, maybe it can be screened. If we get into more details, then we can go into.
I mean, the people that do end up coming in, I would get a very good 30-second summary here at the meeting. Those people really.
And some of the
It is a
conversations,
paper tool.
it is, and it's gonna always be in the paper, it's always gonna be in the minutes. The bigger discussions we have, the longer ones, like proper canvas or the townhomes, those are big projects. And all over, we need to have big discussions. I feel like. But a single house where it's small tweak on 100 square feet and Carlos is good with it. And people are okay with the design. I trust Carlos.
I think, so, and part of, I agree, there are, and that's why I said, complex issues, new topics, where you're in kind of new ground, those are things you're gonna, but you put in your agenda that it's gonna be a longer meeting because of that.
An hour on this. Yeah.
And there, I think if I would, in review of that. So I listened to the meetings kind of with some of the houses and things. And I do think it got to a point where it wasn't, I don't necessarily think, I think that I don't think it was a good dialogue at a certain point in time. It probably could have been stopped. Because you knew you weren't going to approve it. You knew at a couple of different meetings you weren't going to approve it. And at some point you could have just gotten to the point, because it became a little bit more argumentative. You could have just at that point said, this is what we need from you. But that was a unique situation. That was unusual for how things typically come before this body.
I think some of that, some people weren't here at the previous meetings. And I think we might need to do a better job of, if somebody missed, the meeting, bringing them up to speed as to where we're at. And maybe even, if we had a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, somebody could go through that and quickly see, what was been highlighted and reviewed and discussed.
I
That'd be
would
like
also-
their homework for missing the meeting.
You can also watch the recording of the meetings and you can kind of, if you're depending on what you're watching on, you could speed it a little bit. You can kind of skip through some of the stuff so you can get the good presentation. You can hear some of the comments if you've missed the meeting and really come back to the next one just as though, you were there.
I think that's a good point, and I think we should each, and I'm including myself in that, make more of an effort to review the video from the last meeting if we had to miss. And so we're kind of up to speed, so to speak, with some of the major issues. And I know I don't do that, but I think we should.
I do that. Sometimes goes in a different direction. Really use this up. No, we're all busy. I know it's crazy, times. But that's
And then again, it's like, don't be afraid to discuss. If it's not being productive, try to stop it. Typically it is, but I think it will help. I think having some type of allotment of time for an item is really kind of the best way to start. And then you can kind of try to figure out, okay, that also allows if Carlos knows that 30 minutes has been allotted to something, he can say, because a lot of times the petitioner will say to Carlos, what are they going to expect of me? And he can say, well, we think this should take about this long. Be prepared to, if you're going to introduce your project, if you want to talk about your project, do it within 3 minutes, do it within, and then he can guide them in that way so that they understand. The people that speak the longest are the people that weren't sure that they were going to speak. And then you say, well, would you like to say something? And then they don't shut up because they get that nervous and they just keep talking, which is probably what I'm doing. And then the last thing is that you might need to add additional meetings. The council keeps, and you're going to do that. And the council keeps that third Tuesday. They don't keep it booked, but that is kind of our go-to if we need to have another meeting. And I'm going to suggest that, with the existing workload, with the upcoming, comprehensive plan that we're going to talk about next, that may be something that you're going to want to think about. But you can see how it goes. You don't have to start that right now. And all of these, the other thing is,
I think that
these are your meetings.
I think that would be good to consider if we can shorten the length of time for these meetings by implementing these things. If we keep going with the 2.5, 3 hours, nobody's going to want to do that for a third, time. So,
Yeah. And I think that you guys, again, it's really hard because you probably are now at a point where meetings are longer than they need to be. I would probably say that as just, again, as an observer. But how do you tighten that up and keep the great things that make this commission so great? But I think there are some small things you can do. And so I'm going to leave this for you so that you guys can have a conversation now or later or whatever, or you can just say, Carlos, try doing the timing thing. Let's see how the next meeting goes. And then you can kind of keep this and think about other options.
yeah, I think that's great.
I'd like to
I'm okay.
read through this and think about it a little bit.
Mind if I-
And after some of those ideas Chairman.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, in fact, I might give Barb a call, since she's reviewed all of these meetings, kind of to have a little, discussion,
Mind if I make a quick comment?
Okay.
Carlos was kind enough to keep me anonymous. Obviously, I was the one that sent the email around inviting this discussion. And Barb, thanks for this thoughtful analysis, genuinely. There are a couple things that I've noticed. I've just been kind of absorbing that I thought maybe I would share that might help accelerate the process for us. Because I understand the thought of adding another meeting, but I think what we need to be doing is running a tighter ship to make better use of the time that we devote rather than just gobbling up more time. I think there's some juice to be squeezed from this fruit. So if you don't mind, I've got a couple. If I
Yeah,
can just.
yeah, go ahead.
So number one, focusing on our task. There are a lot of times in the meetings where, and I'm guilty of this too, we wander down paths that aren't really within our purview or our expertise. Some examples, although not comprehensive. One, water mitigation plans. I don't think anyone on this panel is an expert in stormwater management. Yet we find ourselves oftentimes discussing cisterns and water flows and repositories, and that's without that. None of us has that expertise. So I think what we need to do is rely on someone who does have that expertise and sign off on it and be done with it. I think we waste a lot of time talking about those kinds of technical implementation aspects, and it's wasted time because we don't know what we're talking about. And myself is included in that characterization. Another example would be traffic studies. We sometimes get stuck talking about traffic flows and are the cars coming from here and how is this going to increase that? Also not within our bailiwick, also something we should be hiring experts to look at. And I think having a third-party expert look at this, analyze it with their expertise and sign off on it is worth 12 hours of us discussing this, probably more. So I think really understanding what our task is and then accomplishing that task and moving on is a good way for us to speed things up. Two, deferring matters to normalize the meetings. I mean, tonight, obviously, we're talking about this, and it's my fault. But typically, this would be a short meeting. I think shorter meeting. I don't necessarily agree with Barb that kicking the can is what we would be doing by deferring certain matters. I think what we can do is look at our workload, and rather than just whatever comes down the pipe that 2 weeks goes on to the next agenda, we look at that meaningfully and try to load balance it a little bit and say, look, we're going to, you came in late in the week or whatever, you're on the next agenda for next week because we've already got a full agenda and we're going to push you to the next one. And what will happen is we'll have some of the short meetings be longer, but the longer meetings won't be as long. And so they'll normalize to maybe 2 or 2.5 hours rather than having the 3.5 hour, behemoth that we have to grapple with every once in a while. Three, I think the consent items is a spectacular idea. I mean, that worked really well, especially if we don't have to read through all of the motions individually. If we can just kind of do our homework, to Carol's point, understand what's good and what's not, and just move that all in, I think that would save a ton of time. I think we all have a lot of faith in Carlos to assess these things and know when there's going to be a problem versus, he knows enough about us to know what's good and what's going to cause a discussion. The fifth one, I'm going to use a phrase that is in my world, but advisory opinions. I think we need to avoid giving advisory opinions. A lot of times we'll get matters, and I know why Carlos is doing this. We'll get matters that aren't actually up for decision, but they're up for discussion. We're talking about something that's coming down the pipe. I think that's a luxury that perhaps we can't afford these days because we are so busy. I think if there's a matter, it needs to come before us. We need to decide, it needs to be an active matter rather than one that's kind of still in the early baking phase. Yeah, I don't think we can, because what happens is we discuss it once at the introduction and then 3 meetings later, then the motion's in front of us and we discuss it all again. It's duplicative, and typically, like in a courtroom proceeding, judges don't take on advisory matters because it's a waste of their time. They want to see a matter when it's ripe for decision. And I think that's something that we need to employ here to avoid wasting time discussing things twice. And I think it'll force the applicant to take their application more seriously if they know that this is their one bite at the apple. And maybe they'll be willing to make concessions in their application more readily, knowing that this is up for discussion, and if we vote it down, it's going to be gone. So I think there's real merit in having an active matter in front of us, a real petition instead of just an advisory kind of discussion. And then last, and I'm probably guilty of this more than most, is rabbit holes. I think that sometimes we end up going down rabbit holes on matters that are perhaps germane to what our role is, but like in the minutia. And some of that, and I understand the need to give a presentation to the public, but some of that I think is spurred by Carlos's presentation. He gives a very detailed presentation, and we start thinking about things, and then we start talking about all of them, because that's human nature. And I think maybe if we all worked, myself included, maybe particularly, all worked on controlling our comments to really what's focused on moving the ball forward and getting the job done and moving on to the next one, I think we can move at a brisker clip and not get bogged down with some of these rabbit holes. So if I were to put these in a hierarchy, I would say focusing on our task is the number one thing. I think we spend too much time talking about stuff that we don't know about, and it really is, as I understand it, isn't within our purview. And then number two is the advisory opinions. I think just having active matters with a real petition in front of us and not getting a quick look at things that are coming down the pipe. I think getting rid of those two or addressing those two issues would accelerate the process. So thanks for my platform. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, several things, actually. I disagree with you. Yeah, Harley. Whether you like it or not, stormwater and traffic management, I mean, that's part of what a planning commission does. And
No, but I
it
think,
is not our job to do a traffic study, but we can analyze and ask questions, and that is what we're supposed to do.
I think,
And there's a difference, and I think we just have to live with the fact that, I mean, I've been reviewing traffic studies for 30 years, but I couldn't do one. Guarantee it. You wouldn't want to find what's on my traffic study. That's just part of the deal. I mean, it's, unfortunately, 'cause I hate reading them, but the stormwater is much the same. I mean, we're here to ask those kinds of questions.
but there
And-
might be a time when you're not the expert at it. And maybe if there is a question, we do need to, instead of us trying to figure out the answer in a group setting with people that aren't experts, identify what the questions are and try to find somebody who knows the answer.
Yeah, absolutely, but we still have to look at it and discuss it.
We still have to
And we
look at
can't-
it. I
We
agree.
can't just, vote off. I mean, we can't necessarily design the answer or do a traffic study. It's like we can't necessarily design the building, but we still have to have some understanding enough so that we can make our decisions. And
Some of the
sometimes you
biggest-
have to ask the expert questions about the information.
I'm in a family business and I work with my brother and my dad and stuff like that. And the biggest issues that we get into issues with, arguments, are things that we don't know. Because we're both going from one extreme to the next. And there's nobody who really can help you guide you to really what's truly the actual argument. And we had to go through family business consulting to get them to tell us. You need to find somebody who knows this stuff rather than you trying to figure it out. And we instituted that, and it's worked out fantastic. And I do think that is something that we should consider here, because this way we don't get into
Family
arguments.
business council.
Family business consulting. Yeah, it's more like a. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, business therapy.
I've got one more point.
know, and you go get help. That's right, and it works out great.
I've
And
got
Carol,
one
before we
more
move
point.
on, do you mind if I just maybe clarify my point on the traffic study issue?
Okay.
Just really quickly.
But I don't want to lose my point.
Oh, okay, go ahead then. Go ahead.
Okay, the other is that with regards to Co's bringing items to us so that we could begin to think about something. I think it really is a valuable thing when, especially when Carlos has a big project that he knows we're gonna need to mull over it. Okay, I mean, it's nothing worse than having something land on your desk and you have to respond to it right away and you haven't really had time to absorb it, think about it, get used to it, think about what your questions are. You know, I like the fact that we get introduced to some of these things and have a chance to think about it, you know, to, like when Opus came before us and said, you know, this is coming. We want to talk to you about what's coming, this is what the project's gonna be. So what we want to do, we had a chance to ask some superficial kinds of questions. And think about it, so when we actually got down to, okay, it's an actual agenda item, we knew what we were looking at. We had concepts in mind, we had questions in mind, we knew where we wanted to go with this. We had some idea about it. It wasn't a surprise. We were ready to make a good decision for the community. And I think that's how I approached it. And I like the fact that we get introduced to some of these things before their actual agenda items. I mean, to me, that really helps me make a better decision.
So two things. One, I think on the traffic study type stuff, I agree that it's within our purview and it's part of our job to make decisions on it. But I think quite often we wander into questioning or analyzing the study as opposed to reacting to the results. So for example, if we get a traffic study and it says, hey, this new Opus development, it's going to add 15% more traffic to this intersection. We can decide whether that's acceptable or not. But I think often, this is just kind of a hypothetical example, but often we dig into whether that 15% is accurate and what that, you know, what analysis actually caused that to happen. And I think that's where we take a wrong turn, is that we're now redoing or evaluating the specialist's work as opposed to just digesting the answers that we get. Same for the stormwater. You know, we can look and say this, you know, this is going to add 10% more water to this sewer. Are we okay with that or not? But when we try to redesign the water plan, that's not something that I'm not qualified to do. And I don't think it's something that we should be spending our time on. So I think it's really just how we react to those things rather than not doing it at all. It's just, you know, digesting the answer and seeing whether that's the right answer as far as the community is concerned. As far as what I've considered the advisory opinions, I agree, they're really valuable. My concern is that we've only got so much time and there are things that we have to do and things that are luxury items, I would say. And I would characterize those introductions as luxury. Perhaps we can get the benefit still by just receiving those via email and digesting them for ourselves rather than spending time here with the full commission getting a presentation on it. That way we can still get the benefit of the preview without, you know, at a time that's convenient for us. I'm getting ready for bed. I can sit there in bed and read through it, you know, for a half hour, rather than having it be concentrated at this time where all of us are together, because I think there's more valuable stuff we can be doing with this time. We could be digesting those kinds of things on our own. So maybe that's a different approach.
I think there's, with that particular item, we talked about that a little bit. And I think there's maybe even a middle ground on that, because one of the things when we bring a project, if he brings a special project up, it's also a lot, it gets it on the agenda. And so then it's a way of, again, of notifying people in some ways. But what you could do is you could have a separate section that's at the end of your meetings that are upcoming projects or potential projects. And it's, you know, and you don't necessarily, you can decide for yourselves, well, do you want if you're going to do this and you want an introduction to a upcoming project, do you want the developer there or not? Or do you want Carlos just to tell you about it? And, you know, and show you, you know, kind of a quick PowerPoint presentation or something in that. So you can kind of have it both ways without necessarily having a lot of time. But again, you know, not every project's the same, you know, and if you have, you know, depending on, you know, what it is, maybe you want the introduction to be a little bigger or a little smaller or you know, or whatever, but you can probably keep it in your agenda keep it towards the end of the agenda
Yeah.
and keep it limited in
It becomes
time
optional
and
then.
scope.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
those
'cause
are good ideas.
The townhome, I remember them coming, speaking a good amount, good introduction, but then we didn't see it again for 3 months. And that's a good example. of You're right. It's not that it's not valuable. It's, we have to prioritize.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, but it is nice and it also gets that petitioner kind of reading before their petitioner in front of you. But you don't necessarily need them either, you know.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I think that's just
Carlos
a
can do
luxury, you know,
Yeah,
If time's valuable.
I
Yeah.
think would be good is, if we do add the time, try to load balance, just like you were saying. I mean, if all of a sudden we're doing these, time schedules and we're going past 9:30, that should be a red flag that maybe if we can move things around, let's do that.
Yeah.
I do think there's sometimes where if there's a discussion item that's not a priority, and if it's after 9:30 or something, we need to kick that down, especially if it's not a priority. Prioritizing things would be the best way to do it.
I do like the time box too, even if it doesn't
Oh,
always
I
work.
love the
it
time box.
keeps, it almost puts us on a clock to try to keep it in that
Yeah.
boundary. I think that actually, it won't always be perfect, but if people think they like 20 minutes, we think we're gonna keep it 20 minutes. Oh, wait, we're running late. It might keep us from keeping it on point.
right.
I will try to review all these things. I'll probably talk to Barb too, to get a little bit more constructive criticism, how to kind of keep things moving. But if you have any other specific ideas, don't hesitate to tell me, okay? Especially if it's really bad or, if it's good. All right. And be free to interject or jump in, don't wait, because I think we're all pretty good. We all get along real well. We all have good opinions. So let's just kind of keep that rolling. So that being said, I think let's move on to the next item. Comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan, there's two things that I'd like to talk to the commission about. And of course, this is probably one of the most exciting components of what this commission does in there. And many of you have had the luxury to see the current 2006 strategic plan or comprehensive plan come to fruition and see everything and all the activity that's going on in there. And we're now in a phase to reassess that vision and to implement the next vision for the next 20 years for our community. And that being said, and given the discussion we just had about the commission and its time, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the commission considering the creation of a steering committee that would report to the commission to kind of oversee the day-to-day operations of the comprehensive plan. What are the day-to-day items? Well, they would be, through the selection of the, and interviews with the consultants, the recommendation to the commission of which consultant to utilize, and ultimately the council has a final say since they hold the purse strings in there. And then the coordination and attendance at the various public meetings in there, where again, this to require the commission to kind of oversee that with the current type of activity that we have going on, it's quite a bit. And I think the steering committee would assist on that time management process for you. And then finally, most importantly, it would also help us to be a little bit more inclusive and diverse, diverse in the representatives of the community that serve on that steering committee. So that is the first component that I'd like to discuss. And then I've indicated a suggestion in there that have 3 representatives from this commission to sit on that steering committee, an opportunity for the other major commissions and boards to have a representative to sit on the steering committee. Those boards being the Economic Development Commission, the Parks Committee, and the Housing Authority. Now, I'd include the Zoning Board of Appeals or the Building Board of Appeals because they're kind of separate entities, not specifically tied to the implementation of the comprehensive plan or setting a policy. And then to have 6 at-large members that would be selected by staff to represent, a diverse and inclusionary representation of the community. And that's looking at all the different demographics, whether it's location, race, ethnicity, and age in that process.
Agreed. I like it.
Carlos, Are we gonna have a council liaison or should the council actually have a representative on the student? Committee? How's that gonna work?
It's a good question, and that's up to the commission. I mean, the liaison would, the commission itself will have a liaison. We have here. It's up to the commission. I mean, I don't oppose having a council member. The council members would then select or whether they would maintain the commission's liaison on that committee, which I think would be more consistent with that process. I don't think that there's anything out there that would restrict or prohibit a member of the council being as part of that steering committee.
Missy, what do you think about that?
Doing this for 22 years. That was one of the things that bothered me here was like, how come the liaison, the PCDC is not in the steering committee? But what I will say is, as I did back in the day, I'm trying to bring this committee back to Carlos being able to do his job versus become a park director, is that even while being on the steering committee, if people were to ask me personally, what do you think, Missy? I'm going to say it's not what I think, it's what you think. So, yes, I would love to be a part of this. I always like to hear, listen, but I want to limit my ability to do any levels of influencing these people. So, I don't know how comfortable they will be, but I'm not here to be an influencer. If I were to be on the steering committee, I would be actually, believe it or not, folks, sitting back and doing a lot more listening, and just taking it in and just being a part and making sure that we're doing what is best and what y'all need to be doing on behalf of getting the citizens' input and going to the next round of this comprehensive plan. Because in 2004, when we took over, thank you, we didn't really know what we wanted. And I said, let's just start over. And so we've had a great 20 years or more. But yeah, this is my baby. So what can I say?
The members of the community, is that people who have to be all of our residents, or, because I was going to suggest also business owners might be interesting, because so much of the comprehensive plan I feels like covers all of Boulevard, not only, but I'm just wondering if it makes sense to have business owners who maybe aren't in residents of all of that, because that's how all of that is reflected. Just a thought.
Maybe two business owners.
Maybe
and four community
Or
members.
two additional to add to it, just an idea.
That's a good idea.
Whether or not you have a business representative or not, you would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's possible. It's totally up.
And I was just thinking, if these people are the ones also rating, the RFQ and rate, because I've done RFPs and RFQs before, and like, you come in with bias and things like that, and so we have to be careful, but the business owners, I mean, they really are the face of all of it, so much, and they can tell us how it is to work with all of that.
Maybe
Well,
somebody
that's
from
part of
the-
what the consultant, when they go about to engaging the community, that's part of what they
Agreed, but
They
I'm
do.
just thinking
should be.
they also have an agenda too, and they want to please, but it's
Sure.
just a thought.
We have different businesses. I think you got the Olive Street, the retail and stuff, but then you have the industrial.
That's a great
So
call.
maybe one person in industrial and one person.
Yeah.
And then you've got people who work from home.
Yeah,
And
but
Proper candidate.
We'll meet with you.
Doesn't the steering committee, I guess the correction in reading through this, does the steering committee vote on the RFQ Or is it?
They would be forwarding to the commission their
Their
recommendation.
recommendation, yes.
Correct.
But they do the rankings, so to speak, on the 25, the 100-point scale on the 25. and things like that,
Mhm.
Which they're gonna spend the majority of time looking at it. I would think it's gonna carry a lot of weight. to us.
Good. I mean, but you still have an opinion.
Of course.
Um,
Of course, but what's the point of having it? We're not gonna take their values.
Yeah,
I've steering committees, I've worked with a number of them. I've formed a number of them, okay? I mean, they can all behave and do their work differently. So if we want them to be the body that does first review and interviews the planning consultants, that's fine. You know, you don't have to do it that way. I mean, you can have a steering committee and the planning commission can still interview them, or there can be a subcommittee of the planning commission. I mean, there's no particular rules about how the steering committee has to work. Generally, steering committees guide the planning process to help the consultant access people in the community. Get out, you know, when they're doing the community engagement, a big part of what steering committee does is make sure that they're reaching the business community, that they're reaching the housing community, that they're talking to people who live in the apartments, you know, because they don't necessarily know the community that well. They could be from California, you know, they don't know anything about all of that.
So it'd be
So-
good to have business owners be part of this.
Because a party is not on the steering committee, doesn't mean they're not going to be part of the planning process.
No,
Okay,
but this
so-
will help get,
It's in order for us to want to have the business community involved, okay? It doesn't mean they need to be on the steering committee for that to happen.
But there's a difference between business and the entire community giving input versus people who are actually going to rate the different groups and give a suggestion. They may not be the ultimate deciders. To me, this group's gonna carry more weight than the collective art, individual.
That's not really, no.
Okay, and that's my question.
That's not really true.
They're not gonna do that.
you have to make a decision. When would you like a decision on this? Tonight?
I think we'd like to move on in that process. Now, there's still the opportunity. What I'd like to get is the commission comfortable with the steering committee. Now, as we get into the details here, hearing some of the, some of the comments in there, we can reassess the numbers or the representation. What I hear so far that there is some support to creating a steering committee in there. And I think it's essential because given the time and the flexibility
I think.
of having a committee, report that process back to this commission. And again, remember, ultimately, this is the commission's plan. You're just just as the council delegates this commission to do its land use review and policies, you're kind of delegating to this commission to assist you in the preparation of the strategic plan. Or the comprehensive.
I'm seeing that everybody's in favor of this. It just sounds like right now, we're just kind of arguing over whether we want to include businesses or not. We can think about that. Maybe at this point in time, we could say 6 community members and possibly business, at this point. And then we can kind of, refine that, and see where we go. Does that sound all right? Sure.
Maybe the community member needs to be a business person.
Right, 2 for 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. No.
My only thing about putting 2 and
Yeah, I think we want to keep it. I don't think you want to add more to this.
Yeah.
And understand too, that in theory, the representative of the Economic Development Commission is a conduit to the business community through that board. Now, in their representation, 2 members are business representatives and residents of all of that. So there may be some advantages there of picking up somebody, and then one of the 6 is, could play another dual role or a
Yeah.
single role. So,
I think that would be good.
okay. The next aspect is the requests for qualifications are pretty standard. So I've drafted up a combination that built on the framework of what was utilized in Clayton a couple years ago. But also, you can get a lot of information from other RFQs, both through the Planning Association, Googling, and all that. So this includes a comprehensive list of things that we saw in other municipalities within the state of Missouri. I tried to stick in within the state because there are state standards that we have to ensure follow through. So this is the core of the plan. So you have a copy of the draft RFQ. But what I've highlighted in red were the main components to get some, consensus from the commission to ensure that we have the right content. We want them to review prior plans. We want them to analyze the implementation of the current plan, to engage the community regarding direction on, and here's the all comprehensive list. Are we covering all aspects that we want within this plan? Then finally to reaffirm, modify our vision and goals, and ensure that there is a component regarding sustainability and equity within this new plan. Following
What do we mean by equity?
equity in terms of making sure that we're considering, the diversity of our community, both economically, racially, and such. So you have owners, you have renters, you have different areas within all of that in which the value of housing or the type of housing is completely different. We want to make sure that that there are opportunities in our land use decisions that consider the aspects of where it is in its surroundings. It can't be just an assumption that this is good for all. There should be an assessment or evaluation of this is good, and looking at it in the different categories or eyes of our community.
Would that include DE and I, basically?
Mhm.
Okay, I think, and that may be worth calling out, I guess, beyond just equity, but diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Equity is a buzzword these days, which means different things to different people. So, and it's
True, but you as a fellow planner, I mean, this is, the definition of that through the American Planning Association is extremely strong. And especially as a certified planner, it is essential that those components be considered. I go by what their definition of view is. I understand what you're saying about, if I threw out the word equity, everybody would have a different perspective of view.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it more, and so are you, just as a professional planner, from a planner's perspective, and how that has become an essential component in the planning community and our profession.
Okay, you might, if we're playing the RFQ, you might want to make that clear. I'm not
And
sure
I can
that
reference them. I mean, these will be
everybody-
planners, and I can reference them to the information's been collected through the APA. The second aspect on this, again, is the community involvement and engagement. And again, we tried to make sure that, we want a consultant that's creative in terms of how they interact with the community, and what means and methods they interact with the community. We've seen various different examples. Shockley and Associates did some really good engagements with the Great Rivers Greenway Trail System when that was being reviewed. We've seen other firms where they had video clips in there, or other means and methods of how it's no longer the town hall type of meeting or everybody, the expectation that if you want to speak in regards to the comprehensive plan, or you have to come to a meeting. It is now us going out and getting the information from the community and to make sure that, again, that they're being cognizant of the DEI aspects of it, ensuring that they're also engaging with community leaders, with business leaders, with businesses, with our various commissions, and then help put all that information together to something that is you know, manageable and easy to read and portray, and then establish our vision and goal for that next 20 years. And that was somewhat of a similar process that we did back in 2004 that led to the adoption of the 2006 plan. And that isn't, we control that. That's an essential component of what we expect from that consultant to do. So if there's any other suggestions to include in there. And then finally, there's the performance management. What is our expectation and how we are going to guide that process. And that's page 5 of the report. Again, that's 5. The other items, I mean, you're more than welcome to provide a comment or input, but they're standard template type of materials of how many packets and things that they're going to be submitting and such. So I was really trying to get the core focus to those, page 4 and 5 in there, and see if there's anything else that the commission would like to add to that.
Anybody else?
I have a question. This has the potential to be a caustic question, but I'm going to try to not have it go there. And I'll preface this by saying I have, a limited perspective of all the different machinery going on in the city of Olivet. But that said, one of the reactions that I've had to the comprehensive plan that we've been applying to date is that while extremely aspirational, it doesn't seem to integrate well with reality. And what I mean by that is we don't have the ability to just bulldoze everything and build it to our design. We're stuck with what properties come up for sale, whether we can bundle these things together, and can't put a bike path here because there's a giant warehouse in the way and we can't move it. And so I guess this is all preface to saying, is there a way that we can focus this comprehensive plan on actual actionable material as opposed to just kind of painting a pretty picture that isn't really achievable? If you look at the comprehensive plan from 2006, they've got these town squares and all this stuff and this architectural unity. None of that has happened. None of that is realistic or possible. And so
Without bulldozing.
Pragmatic solutions.
without $100 billion to come and buy everything up and totally redo everything, and so I think there should be a focus with this comprehensive plan on real world solutions, not just pretty pictures, which I think was a flaw in the last comprehensive plan with my my window into the government.
And I understand because the illustrations led to this grand vision, and we use that a lot in terms of in our presentations to inform, reinforce, of course, the creation of the dynamic sense of this place. That being said, the core components in that are these. There's about 10 or 12 bullet points to each of these of things that we should follow in an effort to strive to that vision. One was like the cross-access easement. We know that the city center is not going to be a town center or so, but we can put in place principles that if this vision was ever to, within this vision, these are kind of the key things that you would be working towards to moving the buildings closer to the street, creating the pedestrian atmosphere and the wider sidewalks and the ornamental identity type of landscaping or streetscape that we want to see. Looking at the building heights and structured parking. So it's those components that, they did show that grand, vision, whether it's an illusion, but it's really those, the principles that, and probably more than what you're asking, but I agree.
No, I get it. And you make a great point. I mean, I guess I would just say, let's focus more on those things. You know, kind of microcosm. These are the tweaks we need to make here and there. I think that would help me at least have more guidance and be able to, you know, mark to the right drum, because it seems when they're so high level and so aspirational, it seems unattainable. It is unattainable, and then it doesn't have as much value. I think
Understand.
more real world instruction on how to make our community better, that's realistic and achievable, I think is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
more particularly.
Jump in. Most plans have at least some aspect of being that high level kind of, you know, you're never gonna look like that really, but you know, but it does give you some ideas. Okay, it makes you think.
What's possible?
What's possible, you know, it part of it is getting a community to think, to help it think about changing. You know, especially in all of that way back then. You know, we come from a community that as I was growing up here in the 60s, it looked like it did in the 1950s. And so when in the 70s and the 80s, it looked like it did in the 1950s. So it just never changed. And the housing never changed, you know, Walgreens, never, I mean, nothing. And there were people who really liked that, you know, and then people like Missy and I came in and it all changed, much to our glee.
Slowly.
20 years, and I was very quick to sit there and hit my mic too, because Carol, I think, you know, from growing up here, you know, Richard, you know, even when I came on council, we still look like 1964. Okay, and everything I heard from the people that I sat at the tables with and said, why am I getting into this? What is it we need to achieve? It's like we keep bringing these things and they keep dying on the shelf. And I was with a council that was very much in the let's do nothing. And to sit there and to get somewhere, it was, okay, you don't like the last land plan, then let's start over. And this plan really was the let's start over. And so part of it had to be a vision, because we didn't, you know, the questions were depth, the questions were height, the questions were, you know, do you want any change at all? And so, yes, while this was a bigger picture, I also remember saying we want that picture on the design of our strategic plan to be fuzzy, you know, because people were really saying, well, that's what you're going to do over here. That's what you're going to do over here. So we began the phrase of it's fuzzy, it's fuzzy. But again, to your point of where we are today, 18 years later, you know, I mean, we have the height. You know, we had a little bit of depth. We're still afraid of depth, but from my conversations and my understanding, this isn't a total start over. This is exactly like you said. It's a tweak and it's citizens' input from what's been accomplished over the last 16 years.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that history. I think if we're going to be paying, you know, real dollars to have some smart folks take a look at this, just making sure that I've had experiences where people put together fancy RFP responses and use lots of pretty pictures, and the substance isn't there, but everyone's not by the pretty pictures. I challenge us to avoid being drawn to that. Not that that's what happened before, but just I think having the smart people look at, like, drive down Olive, drive down these side streets, look at the details and what we need to do that we can actually decide on. We can guide this in a meaningful way. I think that kind of guidance would be really helpful. So that's it.
Yeah, good. That being said, I think let's move on.
Yep, so I would just ask that there's anything the commissioners see, just to forward it or email to that. We are somewhat trying to get this scheduled to go out this April regarding the RFQ. Traditionally, that's just an administrative process, but I would appreciate any commission input or thoughts on there. You have the latest revision in paper, and it is online, I believe now, so I do have your corrections, although those were incorporated. But again, the core things are those, page 4 and 5, because that really represents the direction and the expectation.
Good. That's great.
This is exciting.
It is.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to other business and meeting minutes. I am going to acknowledge that we have received the March 17th, 2022 meeting minutes. So we'll move on after that to reports. Carlos.
Nothing major to report. There's a lot of construction activity. We're going to start seeing a lot of things kind of sprout in the air too. Starting with the Olive Crossing and the as they're wrapping up their footings in there, we'll start seeing first the structural garage component go up on there. We're currently we just signed one of the plats vacating the streets at Irvington and Rhyme to get recorded at county. That plat has to get recorded first before they can consolidate the properties. And so, and that's a different plat. So they're all coming in a sequence right now in that process. Firestone is moving along. I think they're looking to mid to late April for trying to get some type of occupancy. Same with the Oliver. They're looking probably closer to May. If you notice, they finally closed the Freeze entrance. So that means that the pool is in and all the major, the reason it was not closed or enclosed here is because they still had to get a lot of equipment back and forth. Now that the big chunk of it is done, they put up the windows and all that, and I think that's looking pretty good. I've received a lot of positive and negative comments about how close to the street it is. But I think once they have the streetscape in place, I think it'll be a rather reflect a nice vision and such. Across the street, Plant Haven Center, they're moving along. And there, a matter of fact, this week we got the tenant finishes for the Plant Haven itself. And so that's exciting. In there, I think their goal for Plant Haven Farms is to try to meet at least some of the late summer, early fall planting schedule. So they'll be moving along in there. School progress continues to go in there. I haven't heard of or aware of any impact. And then, of course, our parks and the community center are moving fully. You've seen the Stacy Park. They've done the closures there. They're working on the bathroom facilities under the old pavilion, and then also putting foundation for the new pavilion. That structure though won't come back till later summer, August, before you'll see the roof canopy and such in there. On the other side of Warson, the community center that is coming along, moving pretty neat. There was some aerial shots that were showed to council, I think at their last meeting, and you can see the full form of that footprint, and that was pretty exciting going through. Then Don has worked closely with the YWCA, the Miriam Academy, and 39 North about potential early Head Start program in that facility. That's consistent with our plan. That's also very consistent with the 39 North master plan, because there's a big void of getting childcare within that area, and especially for the individuals that work at those facilities. Everybody's excited because it's all a win-win. YWCA is also a business resident in the city of Olivet, so they have some stake in that process. So that was pretty neat. And I think that kind of covers it all. Don, is there anything else?
Nothing else.
We do have about 4 or 5 new homes that will be on our next scheduled agenda, along with the Hilltop development in there, and then we'll see how much information we get from Proper Cannabis. We go for it.
Very good. Missy?
All right, very good. Exciting times, guys. The city council is going to have a council retreat April 30th. We're also going through, the city is going through the budget process for the 2023 fiscal year. Discussions of the usage of the ARPA funding that we'll get, which is about $1.5 million. Attending the municipal league folks and municipal league meetings, and was a bit disappointed to see some of the user tax issues in the county and across other municipalities fail. Prop C. I don't think people fully understood what this is about. There's only one state left that doesn't have waiver legislation. It's not Missouri, it's Florida. And when you have a user tax, it's not double taxation. It is getting the taxes from those of the purchase that were outside from Missouri purchasing in Missouri. So, so, you know, my goal is to, I guess, take on another horse here a little bit if it's what God wants me to do. To get people to understand the importance of user tax. While the city of Olivet has been blessed, as the city manager said, some decisions were made well before she came. And it's been very beneficial to the city. So, you know, I'm going to be talking to you guys if down the road, this user tax issue begins to come back for a better education, because right now the ability to educate is stymied by some lawyers, so some judges. So that's kind of where I'm putting my feet into now. And I've always put my feet into the comprehensive plan, and I'm excited you guys are doing this. So again, you know who your council is going to be. We know who our planning and commission members are going to be. We did discuss at the council meeting those positions that are open for this year. And I'm glad to say that I want you all back. So no one's leaving. And with that, everybody, you know, Easter's coming up, Passover's coming up. Y'all have a good holiday. You hear me say it all the time. I truly appreciate you and love what you do. And I appreciate you much.
Anyone else? That being said, we'll close at 9:43.
Thank you all. And I'm stopping the recording.